Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through the marble corridors of ancient Athens, where even the moonlight seems to be sculpted from silver. The air smells faintly of olive oil and old stone, and somewhere, far above the sleeping city, a goddess grows restless. You can almost hear her sigh, soft, irritated, divine. Athena, goddess of wisdom, warfare, and good ideas gone slightly sideways, has decided to teach democracy to a flock of owls. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because you'll be too busy trying not to laugh or blink while watching divinity collide with bird logic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching this from somewhere far away, post your location and local time down below. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the worn steps of the Acropolis, moonlight gleaming off the marble like spilled milk. The city below is hushed, only the faint murmur of waves from the Piraeus and the distant barking of dogs. Athena stands there, her spear resting casually against a column, her gray eyes fixed on the horizon. Mortals, she mutters, so proud of their democracy, and yet they forget who whispered the idea into their dreams. You hesitate, because correcting a goddess never ends well, but she already knows what you're thinking. You doubt me, she says, not angry, just amused. I was there when Cleisthenes drew those lines, when men shouted over olive branches, calling it equality. She tilts her head, feathers of her helmet catching moonlight. But I wonder, can wisdom truly be taught, or must it be lived? There's a pause, long enough for a cricket to reconsider its life choices. Then she adds, maybe I'll test the theory. Her gaze turns upward, toward the silent dark of the night sky. You follow it, and see the faintest flicker of wings. Owls, dozens, hundreds maybe, circling silently above the Acropolis like drifting thoughts, her sacred birds, her chosen companions, and right now, her test subjects. Athena smirks, the kind of smile that has launched entire philosophical eras. Let's see, she says, if they can govern themselves better than mortals. You open your mouth, ready to remind her that birds don't vote, but she's already at work. Her hand rises and the marble hums faintly. The air vibrates like a plucked lyre string, and a faint shimmer sweeps across the plateau. Suddenly, the night seems more alive, sharper, more deliberate. The owls begin to land one by one, the talons clicking on stone. Some perch on columns, some on pedestals. One even on the tip of a statue's nose. Behold, Athena whispers, the new assembly. You blink. There must be 100 owls staring back at her, blinking in disjointed rhythm. One lets out a soft hoo, another mimics it. Soon the air is filled with low, rumbling hoots, a parliament of birds, literally. Athena claps her hands once, sharp as thunder. Order! And miraculously, they quiet. The scene is ridiculous and reverent at once. Moonlight washes over the goddess and her gathered scholars. The Parthenon behind her seems to approve, glowing faintly. You can almost imagine the city's ghosts leaning over their balconies to watch. Somewhere, Socrates himself might be rolling over in his grave, or maybe just chuckling. Athena paces like a seasoned orator. Democracy, she begins, is the art of the many shaping the fate of all. She gestures toward the owls. Each of you shall have a voice. Each shall vote. Together, you will decide how best to govern your own kind. One owl cocks its head, then swivels it nearly upside down as if trying to process the concept. Another sneezes, probably allergic to responsibility. You step closer. How do you plan to make them understand? She waves her hand, a spark of divine gold swirling around her fingers. I've granted them comprehension enough to grasp ideas, but not perfection. Wisdom must still be earned. That's when you realize You're about to witness the world's first avian democracy. The goddess draws lines on the marble floor with the tip of her spear, marking a semicircle like the pnyx itself. She'll sit here, she says, each according to seniority. Elders on the left, youths on the right. We'll need order. The owls shuffle into place. One bumps another, who retaliates with a wing slap. Ah, she murmurs, so they've learned politics already. You laugh quietly. Historians still argue whether Athens' democracy was ever truly equal, you say. She nods. Even humans struggled. Let's see how they fare. It's strange, watching the goddess who guided warriors now arranging birds like senators. She takes it seriously. Each owl examined, seated and named according to its habits. There's Strix, who blinks twice before every hoot. There's Glaucus, small but sharp-eyed. And one larger bird, with a scar over its beak, who insists on perching slightly above the rest. Athena calls him Archon. When the assembly is finally set, she stands before them and spreads her arms. Citizens of the feathered polis, you are to discuss the laws that shall bind your kind. Begin. For a moment, nothing. Then, like thunder breaking, the first owl hoots. Another responds. A third interrupts. Within seconds, chaos. The night filled with overlapping voices, some deep and commanding, others shrill and indignant. You glance at Athena. She's watching, arms crossed, a faint smile playing at her lips. Democracy, she murmurs, always begins in noise. And she's right. Beneath the cacophony, something resembling order starts to form. Owls group by opinion, some nodding, others flapping in dissent. You realize you're watching the birth of deliberation, primitive, absurd, but eerily familiar. One owl hops to the center, spreads its wings and lets out a long, rhythmic hoot. The others hush. That one, Athena says softly, understands rhetoric. You half expect her to start taking notes for Aristotle. The debate lasts through the night. They argue over nesting territories, worm distribution, and whether daylight hunting should be banned. It's both hilarious and profound. These creatures wrestling with fairness, guided only by instinct and divine suggestion. By the dawn, the first vote is proposed. Should they hunt collectively or individually? Athena, refusing to interfere, gives them pebbles to cast as votes. Light ones for unity, dark ones for independence. You hand her a small pouch of stones, feeling oddly complicit. One by one, the owls hop forward, drop pebbles into a bronze bowl, and step back solemnly. You can't help but admire their seriousness. Of course, one owl immediately tries to eat its pebble. Another drops 3 instead of 1. A third just stares into the bowl, transfixed by its own reflection. Athena sighs, rubbing her temples. Even the Athenians had trouble counting ballots, she mutters. When the tally's done, the result is split. Half for unity, half for freedom. You glance at her. So, what happens now? She shrugs. Gridlock. And so begins the first avian political deadlock in mythic history. As the sun rises, turning the marble pink, you notice Athena's expression soften. They've learned to disagree, she says, without destroying one another. That's the seed. The owls begin to disperse, returning to their perches and nests, some clearly proud, others muttering under their breath. You can almost hear snippets of owl gossip. Did you see how Archon voted? Total sellout. We need new leadership. Athena watches them go, her eyes full of something between pride and amusement. Mortals may think they invented democracy, she says, but perhaps they merely imitated the gods. And the gods, in turn, imitated nature. You glance at her. So, what now? She smirks. Now we see what they do with power. And as you walk down the steps, the last light of dawn painting the Parthenon in gold, you can't help but feel that something monumental has begun. Not just for the owls, but for every creature that's ever wondered if they deserve a voice.
The next night, The Acropolis breathes again under a silver sky. The marble feels cooler beneath your feet this time, dew clinging like tiny pearls. You arrive before Athena, who's already there, waiting, perched on the edge of a column like she's half mortal tonight. The first experiment didn't fail, but it didn't quite succeed either. The owls had argued, voted, and stalemated. Democracy, it seems, has feathers now, and insomnia. Athena doesn't look frustrated. If anything, she seems energized. The first step is confusion, she says, gazing at the scattered feathers left from last night's assembly. Mortals always forget that before democracy came chaos, and a little chaos is good. You smile. You mean you're actually going to give them another chance? Of course, she says, a touch of divine mischief in her voice. You don't abandon your experiment because the test subjects bicker. You gather more data. That's when she does something unexpected. She lifts her hand and a faint hum rolls through the air, like a tuning fork striking eternity. From every olive grove and rooftop in Athens, owls begin to gather again. But this time they come with a sense of purpose. They land neatly, forming circles within circles, each facing inward toward the goddess. The assembly of feathers, Athena announces. You can't help but laugh quietly. Sounds like a parliament name humans would actually use. She nods. They probably will, someday. The owls stand waiting, eyes like polished amber catching moonlight. There must be hundreds now, so many that the air smells faintly of feathers and night oil. The marble seems to vibrate beneath their collective weight, and yet for all their noise yesterday, tonight they are eerily still. Athena gestures for you to come closer. They've earned structure, she whispers. Watch. One by one, older owls step into the center, their feathers darker, eyes slower but wiser. You recognize Archon, the scarred one. He ruffles his wings with a kind of solemn authority and hoots once, a low, measured sound. Instantly, the younger owls respond, forming a perimeter. You whisper, that looks almost organized. Almost, she says, hiding a grin. But they lack symbols. Every society needs something to gather around, a token of unity. With a flick of her wrist, Athena conjures a gleaming bronze disc, no larger than your palm, engraved with the image of an olive branch and an owl. Let this be their standard, she declares, and sets it in the center of the marble ring. Whoever guards it will guard the principles of their democracy. Immediately, 3 owls lunge for it. One pecks furiously at another's wing, the second retaliates with a kick, and the third simply grabs the disc and hops backward, victorious. Athena's eyebrow twitches. Well, she says, we've invented political ambition. You can't help it. You laugh out loud. The sound echoes across the ancient stones. Historians still argue whether the Athenians themselves were any better, you joke. She chuckles. They just had better vocabulary. Then the strangest thing happens. The victorious owl, still clutching the bronze disc, lets out a sharp, deliberate hoot. It's rhythmic, commanding, almost rhetorical. The others hush. Even Athena tilts her head slightly. You whisper, "What's it saying?" She translates softly. It claims leadership. It proposes a council to oversee the assembly. You blink. They're inventing representative government? Not quite, she says. They're reinventing hierarchy, just in new feathers. Still, she lets it happen. The owl places the disc on a small pedestal, a chipped stone from an old temple, and invites 7 others to stand around it. The rest of the assembly begins to murmur approvingly, wings twitching like applause. Athena steps back. Now they have order, or the illusion of it. The night deepens, stars flickering like divine punctuation marks above. The assembly begins to debate new issues, migration routes, worm taxation, and how to prevent wing monopolies. It's absurd, yet mesmerizing. You realize you're watching civilization form in miniature. Athena leans close to you and whispers, "Do you know what amazes me most?" "What?" They're mimicking what they see in mortals. They hold court like the agora, argue like philosophers, and bribe like politicians. You raise your eyebrow. Bribe? I sigh. You'll see. Indeed, within minutes, you notice subtle exchanges. Younger owls slip worms, fresh and wriggling, under the wings of older ones. Promises are hooted in hushed tones. One particularly sly bird hides a fat grub beneath the bronze disk. Athena pinches her bridge of her nose. I didn't even teach them economy yet. You grin. Maybe corruption's just instinct. Or perhaps democracy breeds temptation, she muses. There's a tension now, an invisible thread running through the marble air. Some owls are hooting louder, others whispering behind folded wings. You can sense factions forming, the reformists, the traditionalists, and one rogue cluster you mentally nickname the Worm Party. The debate gets heated, feathers puff up. One owl accuses another of nest bias. Another demands equal roosting rights. Athena, arms crossed, looks both fascinated and deeply tired. They've reached the shouting stage, she mutters. Mortals stayed there for centuries. At one point, a particularly passionate owl flaps into the center and accidentally knocks over the bronze disc. Gasps ripple through the assembly. The silence that follows feels ancient, one of those moments history will remember, even if only in myth. Archon steps forward, lifts the disc back into place, and hoots 3 short notes, authority restored. But now his feathers seem puffier, darker, like he's absorbed the moment's gravity. You glance at Athena. He's changing. Power always changes those who touch it, even those with wings. As dawn creeps over the horizon, the assembly adjourns. Some owls remain, muttering in clusters, while others take off into the pale light. The bronze disc gleams faintly, now smudged with claw marks. Athena looks at it, then at you. They're learning faster than mortals did, she admits, but they're also making the same mistakes. You arch your eyebrow. So, is that success or failure? She smiles faintly. It's democracy. The wind stirs her hair, and for a moment you swear you see the faint shimmer of wings behind her, a spectral echo of her sacred birds. The real test, she says softly, isn't whether they can vote. It's whether they can forgive one another afterwards. You glance at the departing owls. Some fly side by side. Others deliberately veer away. One carries a worm proudly in its beak, the spoils of unseen negotiation. You shake your head. I give them a week before the first scandal. Athena smirks. You're being generous. And as the last owl vanishes into the dawn haze, you can't help but think, democracy, whether feathered or human, always begins with good intentions and ends up with someone hoarding worms. Still, beneath the absurdity, something stirs, a flicker of progress, or at least awareness. For in teaching them how to decide, she has also taught them how to doubt. And in the quiet aftermath, as the goddess fades into the morning mists, leaving only a faint scent of olive and ozone, you realize she isn't testing them at all. She's testing us.
By the third night, the Acropolis doesn't feel like stone anymore. It feels alive, pulsing with invisible debates that cling to the air like humidity. You arrive to find the place transformed. What was once a casual experiment has become something larger, stranger, and just a little terrifying. Athena is already there, of course. She leans against the half-broken pillar, her bronze helm pushed back on her head, expression unreadable. At her feet, the marble gleams faintly in the moonlight, and in its reflection, hundreds of eyes blink back, owl eyes, polished and patient. She turns to you without preamble. Tonight, she says, they vote. You glance around. Again? This time properly. She sounds both hopeful and resigned, like a teacher giving one last test to a class that's memorized the wrong chapter. And indeed, The owls look prepared. Each carries a small pebble, smoothed by beak or claw. Some have marked theirs with scratches, others with streaks of clay or berry juice. The marble floor has been divided into two clear areas, one under the broken spear shaft of Athena's old statue, symbol of unity, and another beside a cracked amphora, symbol of independence. Two sides, you murmur. Classic. Athena smiles faintly. They learn symbolism quickly. But before voting begins, the air ripples. A fat, self-important owl hops forward, Archon naturally, and begins to hoot with the deliberate pacing of a seasoned statesman. You don't need translation to sense the tone. Commanding, charismatic, manipulative in that honey-feathered way. Athena sighs. He's been speaking all day, she murmurs. I think he likes the sound of his own hoot. You chuckle. Historians still argue whether that's the mark of leadership or madness. She smirks. Usually both. Archon's speech goes on for what feels like forever. He hoots about safety, tradition, the sacred right of every owl to hunt under Athena's watchful eye. Then another owl, slender, silver-feathered, clearly from the reformist camp, steps up and counters with a melody of sharp rising notes. You glance at Athena, who translates lazily. Freedom, self-choice, and shorter speeches. That one gets more approving hoots than the first. You whisper, they're forming parties now, aren't they? Oh yes, Athena says, voice dry as marble dust. Give them a few nights and they'll have slogans and campaign mascots. The debate heats up. One owl flaps its wings dramatically, knocking over another's pebble pouch. A scuffle breaks out near the edge of the assembly. Another owl starts chanting rhythmic hoots, primitive slogans, and soon the sound swells until the entire Acropolis trembles. Order! Athena commands, her voice slicing through the noise like thunder. The air stills instantly. Every feather freezes mid-flutter. You will vote, not squabble. Her tone brooks no argument. Even the wind retreats. Then she nods to you. Distribute the bowls. You obey, setting bronze basins on either side of the marble floor. Each owl hops forward, clutching its pebble solemnly, and drops it with a clink. One side for unity, one for independence. The rhythm of the stones echoes like distant rainfall. You can feel the gravity of it, as absurd as it is, a parliament of birds making choices about the shape of their world. And yet, even as they vote, the cheating begins. One young owl sneaks back for a second turn, slipping another pebble in when it thinks no one's watching. Another distracts its neighbor by pretending to spot a mouse, then steals its ballot. Two owls begin hoarding pebbles in their nests, just in case. Athena pinches her temples again. Here it comes, she mutters. You raise an eyebrow. The great pebble scandal of Owl Athens? Exactly. When the final pebble drops, Athena gestures, and the bowls rise from the marble, glowing faintly with divine light. She begins counting, or rather weighing, since even a goddess knows better than to trust mortal arithmetic. But before she finishes, a shadow flits across the moon. You glance up, just in time to see a dark shape swoop down, grab one of the basins, and vanish into the trees below. What was that? You gasp. Athena doesn't answer immediately. She's listening. The night is suddenly alive with angry hoots, the assembly thrown into chaos. Wings beat, feathers fly. One owl shouts accusations. Well, hoots them, but the meaning is clear. Someone's stolen the vote. The goddess straightens slowly, eyes like storm clouds. A thief, she says softly. The first in their democracy. You half laugh. So we've invented crime now? Progress, she deadpans. Together you descend the steps of the Acropolis, following the trail of scattered pebbles through the olive groves. You find the culprit easily. It's not hiding, just sitting smugly on a low branch with the bronze basin tucked beneath its wings. It's one of Archon's supporters, naturally. Athena gestures, and the olive grove itself seems to lean in. Why, she demands, not as a punishment, but as curiosity. The owl puffs up, hooting indignantly. She says, Athena translates, that the others were corrupt, that the vote was already rigged, that she merely corrected the injustice. You snort. So the first justification of fraud. Congratulations, they've mastered politics. Athena doesn't smile. She kneels slightly, bringing her gaze level with the owl. You cannot purify injustice with more injustice. That's not wisdom, that's vanity. The owl tilts its head, unrepentant. For a moment the goddess looks tired, immortal tired. The kind of weariness that comes from watching the same mistakes repeat through eons. Perhaps, she murmurs, this is why democracy always needs gods watching over it. You hesitate. Do you mean you'll intervene? She shakes her head. No, I mean they'll learn more if I don't. And with that she turns away, leaving the owl with its stolen basin. Back atop the Acropolis, the assembly has descended into anarchy. Some owls demand punishment, others cry for amnesty, and a few just start hooting nonsense slogans because they like the sound. Athena raises her hand for silence. You have chosen chaos, she declares, so chaos you shall have. A chill wind sweeps through the stones, and for a heartbeat, everything stills. Then, slowly, she lowers her arm. But every chaos carries its seed of order. Find it or lose your democracy forever. And then she vanishes. No flash, no thunder, just gone. Leaving you surrounded by a mob of squabbling owls and the faint scent of olive smoke. You stare at them, then sigh. So, does anyone here know how to count pebbles? A dozen heads swivel toward you. No one hoots. That's when you realize you've been promoted. The next hours blur into a mix of frantic counting, heated arguments, and occasional pecking. Somehow, with divine absence as their only guidance, the owls begin to calm. They form small groups, recount pebbles, and yet, miraculously, agree to re-vote in 3 days. When Athena returns at dawn, she finds them sleeping in neat rows, wings folded over their chests. She looks genuinely surprised. You grin. They cleaned up their own mess. She smirks. Then perhaps they've learned something after all. You stretch, bones aching. What lesson exactly? That power isn't just taken or given, it's trusted. And trust, once broken, takes longer to rebuild than marble. The sun rises, gilding the Parthenon, and the owls blink awake, blinking like sleepy citizens after a long revolution. Somehow, democracy has survived another night. But as the goddess walks away, you catch the faintest flicker of concern in her eyes, because in the distance, far beyond the olive trees, you can hear another parliament forming. New hoots, new factions, new ambitions. The experiment is growing wings. And somewhere deep down, Athena wonders whether she's just created not wisdom, but politics itself.
You return to the Acropolis the next evening, half expecting silence, but instead you find chaos dressed as celebration. The owls have organized what looks suspiciously like a festival. Feathers whirl through the warm air, worm vendors line the marble steps, even the statues seem to lean forward to watch. The scent of night-blooming jasmine mixes oddly with the tang of wriggling protein. Athena is perched on a column, arms folded. "She call it an economic summit," she says dryly, "but it's basically a farmer's market." You look around at the bustle. At least it's peaceful. For now, she tilts her head, until they start realizing that worms are limited resources. Indeed, you can already see it happening. Every trade brings a sharper tone. Every exchange is followed by 3 side glances. The worms, fat and glistening, are now the de facto currency of the owl polis. Somewhere along the line, democracy has sprouted capitalism. A plump owl hops by carrying a string of worms like jewelry. Another waves a single worm aloft and shouts, well, hoots, something that sounds suspiciously like "market opens at moonrise." Athena sighs. "I should never have let them meet the concept of scarcity." You chuckle. Historians still argue whether scarcity was invented by the gods or discovered by accountants. "That's because both keep poor records," she replies, half amused, half resigned. As the moon climbs, the festival becomes an assembly. The owls gather in neat rows again, wings brushing, eyes gleaming with greed and curiosity in equal measure. In the center stands Archon, scarred and proud, flanked by his council. Before him rests a pile of worms, tribute collected from across the groves. Athena narrows her gaze. They're taxing each other now. It's impressive, disturbing but impressive. Archon hoots a long speech. Athena translates lazily beside you. He says, "We must feed the city equally. No owl should hunger while another feasts." That sounds noble. She lifts her finger. Wait for it. Archon pauses, then continues. "Therefore, every owl shall contribute 1 worm per week to the central reserve." You grin. Ah, the birth of bureaucracy. The crowd hoots approval, at first. But one small owl, silver-feathered and fierce-eyed, hops forward and interrupts with a sharp, defiant hoot. The tone is unmistakable, protest. Athena smiles faintly. That one argues that the worms were earned, not gifted, that redistribution discourages excellence. You groan. They have invented economics. And resentment, she adds. The debate spirals quickly. One faction argues for equality, another for merit. A third proposes simply hoarding worms in hidden caches, which receives surprising applause. Archon's council flaps their wings for order, but the sound only fuels the frenzy. Finally, Athena steps forward, her voice cutting through the uproar. "Enough!" The owls freeze. "You have built markets, but you have forgotten measure. When food becomes symbol, hunger becomes politics." The silence that follows is uneasy. The smaller owl, clearly the reformer, bows its head slightly, but Archon's eyes gleam. Power, you realize, tastes sweeter than worms. When Athena steps back, she whispers to you, "Let them resolve it themselves. They must learn that fairness isn't decreed, it's chosen." So you wait. For the next several nights, the worm economy grows complicated. Owls trade not only worms, but worm futures, worm loans, worm-backed promises. A few begin carving tiny clay tablets to track debt. One particularly ambitious bird opens a nest bank. Athena watches it all with a mixture of fascination and mild nausea. "This is exactly how mortals started," she mutters. "They invent fairness, then immediately invent loopholes." You note something else. The gap between rich and poor owls widens quickly. Some nests overflow with wriggling wealth, while others peck at the dust. Whispers spread, accusations of hoarding, of insider worm trading, of favoritism within Archon's council. Then the scandal breaks. It begins with a midnight rainstorm, soft and warm. You're sheltering under a colonnade when a young owl flutters toward you frantic. It clutches a half-eaten worm and hoots wildly. Athena appears beside you, summoned by the noise. He says that the council's reserve is empty. The communal worms have vanished. You blink. Vanished? As in stolen? The owl nods vigorously. Athena closes her eyes. Oh, by the sticks! Within an hour, the assembly reconvenes, thunder rumbling overhead. Archon stands at the center, feathers sleek despite the rain, insisting on calm. But the crowd is unrestless. Owls shout accusations. 2 flocks nearly come to blows. Athena whispers to you, "Here it is, the great worm scandal." You can't help yourself. Sounds like something that would make an excellent marble relief. If they survive it, perhaps I'll commission one. She steps forward, her voice low but commanding. Who among you touched the reserve? The silence that follows is absolute, until a lone owl near the rear hoots timidly. Athena listens, nods, then turns grim. It claims Archon's inner circle took the worms for safekeeping. You glance at the council. None deny it. The goddess exhales slowly. Ah, oligarchy. How quickly it hatches. Lightning flashes, illuminating the assembly in stark silver. The rain intensifies. One by one, the council members hoot excuses. They feared theft. They needed to inspect the stockpile. They meant to redistribute soon. It's all painfully familiar. You mutter, even their scandals sound like Senate hearings. Athena doesn't laugh. This is their crucible. Let's see what wisdom they find in fury. The crowd erupts. Some owls demand exile for the guilty. Others plead mercy. One particularly dramatic bird calls for a return to monarchy, earning an immediate downpour and a very unimpressed look from the goddess. By dawn, the worms remain missing, and faith in the system has dissolved like mud in rainwater. The assembly disbands, exhausted and divided. Athena lingers beside you as the first sunlight breaks. Do you think they'll recover? You ask. She might, but only if they learn that trust is a currency more fragile than worms. She brushes her hand against the marble, leaving faint gold streaks that fade quickly. I will not fix this for them. Mortals must learn from their messes, so must these. You watch the city below awaken, human Athens yawning beneath divine irony. Maybe they'll surprise you, you offer. She half smiles. Hope is the one thing even gods can't regulate. Then she's gone, leaving you amid the feathers, the damp, and a faint smell of ozone and guilt. Days pass and the scandal ripens like fruit left too long in the sun. The once bright chatter of the owls fades into uneasy murmurs. Nests that used to echo with song now thrum with suspicion. Every rustle in the branches sounds like conspiracy. You perch on a ledge overlooking the olive groves. Below, 2 owls whisper furiously, glancing around as if the trees themselves might be eavesdropping. Athena appears beside you, faintly translucent in the morning haze. She looks like someone watching her favorite experiment teeter on the edge of explosion. She says they've started forming factions. One group calls themselves the Talons. They demand punishment. The others, the Wings, argue for forgiveness and reform. Talons and wings, you repeat. You have to admire their sense of branding. Athena smirks. Mortals would call this the birth of parties. The talons grow loud first. They meet under the shadow of the Parthenon, sharp-eyed and angrier than the hour. They accuse Archon's council of betrayal, demand resignations, and flat menacingly at anyone who dares defend them. The wings, more measured, speak of unity and rebuilding. We cannot eat blame, says their leader, a gentle owl named Clio. We must mend before we molt. Athena nods at Clio's speech, a rare one,
That one listens. But the crowd doesn't. As always, rage gets better attendance than reason. By the third night, talons outnumber wings 2-1. The air above the Acropolis becomes a swirl of beating feathers and shouting. Worms, or what few remain, are weaponized again, hurled like accusations. Athena raises her hand, but stops herself. No, they must choose how to cool their own storm. You can't help yourself.
Dawn drapes the Acropolis in pale gold, and the air hums with the soft rustle of wings. The city has changed since the worm scandal, quieter, warier, yet somehow prouder. You can feel it in the rhythm of their meetings, less frenzy, more thought. The owls have learned that debate isn't about shouting the loudest, it's about making the silence afterward meaningful. You stretch under a fig tree as Athena watches the first assembly of what they now call the Court of Feathers. The name alone makes her grin. They invented law, she says. That didn't take long. Mortals took centuries. These took weeks. The gathering is solemn. A stone platform has been cleared of moss and bird droppings. At its center sits a smooth white feather, symbol of truth. Whoever holds it may speak without interruption. On either side perch the judges, 5 owls chosen by random draw, each representing a different grove. The accused? None other than a gray-feathered owl named Morinth, charged with stealing worms from a neighbor's cache. The irony is not lost on anyone. Athena leans forward, intrigued. Ah, theft again, the universe's favorite crime. You whisper, historians still argue whether law began with theft or with gossip. Gossip, she answers. Theft's just what happens when gossip fails. The trial begins. Morinth fluffs her feathers nervously as the accuser steps forward, hooting indignantly. Translated loosely, it means, she crept into my hollow and took 5 worms. I saw the glimmer of her eyes in the dark. The judges nod gravely. They confer among themselves, scratching notes in the dust with their claws. One of them asks for evidence. Another suggests calling witnesses. It's clumsy, awkward, but it's law. Athena watches, expression unreadable. They're mimicking mortals again. Procedural fairness is just structured storytelling. The first witness, a young owl, flaps nervously and hoots, I saw something move, but maybe it was a mouse, or guilt shaped like a mouse. You stifle a laugh. Well, that clears nothing up. Athena murmurs, perjury by any other name. Hours pass. The trial becomes almost theatrical. Witnesses contradict, spectators comment, someone starts selling roasted crickets on a stick. Justice, it seems, has found its audience. Finally, Morinth is invited to speak. She grips the white feather tightly. I took no worms, but I hid mine in a new spot. Maybe the wind moved his cache. Her voice trembles, not from fear, but from exhaustion. The judges retreat to deliberate, scratching long spirals into the dust. When they return, their verdict is cautious, not proven guilty. The crowd murmurs in confusion, half cheer, half hiss. The accuser looks ready to molt from outrage. Athena nods approvingly. They've invented reasonable doubt. You glance at her. You sound proud. I am, she says softly, because fairness without certainty is the hardest virtue. That night the owls gather again, this time not to judge, but to reflect. They perch in rows, wings folded, discussing how to make trials better. Should evidence be physical? Should punishments fit the harm? Should judges be elected or drawn by lot? Athena leans against a column, smiling faintly. Mortals took centuries to ask those questions. My little philosophers did it in a day. She gestures toward Cleo, who moderates with calm authority. That one's special. I may keep her around for a while. You tease. As an apprentice or as a pet? She gives you a look sharp enough to shave marble. Don't test me. The debate continues into the night. Eventually they agree to formalize their system. 3 levels of judgment, clear records, and the permanent symbol of the white feather as sacred. They even assign a keeper of truth to store it between trials. Athena sighs. Here we go again. They've invented bureaucracy again, and they'll complain about it forever. Maybe that's the real sign of civilization, you say. She smiles. Complaints are democracy's heartbeat. Weeks pass, and word spreads. Owls from distant groves arrive to watch these trials, curious about the idea that conflict could end without clause. The court of feathers becomes a spectacle, equal parts solemn ritual and public entertainment. One evening, a quarrel arises between two visiting owls over territory rights. Instead of fighting, they approach Cleo and request judgment. The crowd hushes, and the trial begins under a blood-red moon. Athena murmurs, "Here it comes, their first test beyond theft. Justice will either grow wings tonight or crash headfirst into a rock." The case unfolds with surprising grace. Evidence is presented, feathers found in the disputed branch, maps drawn in the dirt. Witnesses speak calmly. The judges listen, deliberate, and finally declare a shared arrangement, alternating nights. The crowd cheers. The rivals bow. Athena exhaled slowly. They did it. A compromise. You grin. So what do we call this? Common claw? She rolls her eyes. Try civilization. The sound of owl laughter ripples through the grove. For a moment, the air feels lighter. Justice, it seems, has finally balanced the scale. But progress, like flight, is never steady. A week later, a new dispute shakes the fragile harmony. One owl accuses another of slander. Apparently, during the last assembly, harsh words were exchanged about someone's nest hygiene. The insulted party demands a trial. Athena actually laughs. They've invented libel law. I was hoping to delay that a few centuries. The trial turns ridiculous. Witnesses debate whether smells like wet bark counts as defamation. One owl quotes another incorrectly and gets booed. By the end, everyone agrees that gossip is now a matter of public record. You can't help it. You laugh until your ribs ache. So justice collapses into comedy again. Athena shakes her head, but she's smiling. Law always walks that line between reason and absurdity. Still, amid the laughter, something profound takes root. The owls begin keeping written minutes of their assemblies, tiny scratch marks on bark. For the first time, memory becomes law. Historians still argue whether that was invention or accident, Athena says, but I know better. Every law begins as an act of paranoia. Paranoia? Yes, the fear that someone will forget what happened and twist the truth later. She looks thoughtful, almost wistful. Mortals wrote laws on stone, owls write on bark. The material changes, but the insecurity stays the same. As seasons shift, so does their society. With laws come penalties, with penalties come forgiveness, and with forgiveness comes power. The keeper of truth, originally a ceremonial position, starts making rulings even without the judges present. The owls whisper about corruption. Athena sighs, rubbing her temples. Here we go again. You nod grimly. They've invented judicial overreach. Don't sound so pleased, she warns. The tension grows. Cleo calls an emergency assembly. She perches on a stone and addresses the crowd. Justice belongs to all wings. None should hoard the feather. The keeper steps forward defensively. Without me, chaos returns. Athena leans close to you. They're reenacting every courtroom drama ever written, and they don't even have Netflix. Cleo spreads her wings wide, a gesture of both defiance and peace. Then we'll share the burden, she declares. Let the feather pass nightly between nests. No single owl should hold truth too long. It might start to believe it owns it. The audience gasps. The keeper hesitates, then bows. Athena smiles faintly. They've reinvented checks and balances. You whisper, they're moving fast. Yes, she says, too fast. Evolution is messy when watched in real time. That night she seems quieter. You find her sitting alone on the temple roof, staring at the stars. You're worried, you say. I'm curious, she admits.
Mortals built law to tame chaos. These owls build it to prove they're civilized. I wonder which motive will last longer. You sit beside her. The wind smells of stone and cedar. Maybe both, maybe neither. She glances at you, her eyes softer now. You've been watching them too long. You're starting to sound like one of my philosophers. I'll take that as a compliment. Don't. Most of them ended up exiled or poisoned. You laugh, but she doesn't. Her gaze drifts down to the grove where the owls roost peacefully, unaware of how fragile their new order truly is. Law will hold them for a while, she murmurs, until someone clever decides that fairness is slower than ambition. You raise an eyebrow. Are you predicting another scandal? She smiles sadly. No, I'm predicting history.
The moon tonight hangs like a polished coin above the Acropolis, and below it the owl city hums with energy again. The trials have made them bold. They have discovered that speaking shapes reality, and now they crave more of it. You arrive at the grove expecting another quiet session of the Court of Feathers, but instead you find a vast gathering. Dozens of torches ring the clearing. Feathers glint like silver confetti. An enormous flat stone has been dragged to the center. Carved across it, in crooked lines, is one word: assembly. Athena perches on a column nearby, amused. So, they've decided justice isn't enough. Now they want government. You glance at the crowd. They're holding an election, aren't they? Of course, she replies. It was inevitable. Once you give voices rules, they start asking who gets to make them. The first speaker hops onto the stone, an owl named Deimos, broad-winged and charismatic. He hoots eloquently about unity, prosperity, and reliable worm distribution. His rhythm, his pauses, even his wing gestures feel suspiciously rehearsed. Athena leans closer to you. Mortals invented rhetoric. Owls perfected it overnight. The second candidate, a smaller, sharper owl named Sera, argues the opposite. Fewer decrees, more freedom, fewer feathers in the bureaucratic nest. The crowd cheers wildly, not necessarily because they agree, but because she speaks fast and flaps dramatically. You whisper. Historians still argue whether democracy rewards ideas or performance. Athena smirks. You already know the answer. The speeches continue for hours. Each orator brings something new: humor, poetry, outrage. One even sings a ballad about the worm scandal, accompanied by rhythmic wing beats. The crowd sways and hoots along. It feels less like governance, more like theater. Finally, Cleo steps forward. She doesn't shout, she doesn't sing. She simply raises one feather and says, "If we speak only to be heard, not to understand, then our wings beat in circles." Silence falls. Even Athena looks moved. "They'll elect her," you say quietly. "Of course," the goddess replies. The quiet voice wins when the crowd tires of shouting.
You awaken to the smell of smoke, not dream smoke, the real kind that curls through feathers and burns the eyes. From the high acacia ridge, you see orange spreading across the forest floor, leaping from branch to branch. Athena is already there, watching grimly. Lightning, she says, a careless strike, the kind that tests every constitution ever written. Below, the owls scatter in alarm. The assembly dissolves in panic. Debate turns to shouting, voting to chaos. Every decree they crafted about worm distribution or noise curfews suddenly feels absurdly small. You turn to the goddess. They'll need leadership. They'll need cooperation, she corrects. Leadership without consent is tyranny. Consent without leadership is confusion. The grove is in flames now. Sparks rain like stars. You see Cleo rallying the first council, shouting for calm. We will assign wings to carry water, others to guide chicks to safety. But her words vanish in the roar of wind. Many owls ignore her, flapping wildly toward their nests. Some flee entirely into the night. Athena's voice is low. Here comes the test every democracy faces. Fear. Cleo tries again, louder this time. If we fly apart, we burn alone. If we fly together, we live. A few stop, then more. Slowly, order begins to reform. She divides the sky into sectors, each assigned to a dozen owls. Some scoop water from the river using broad leaves. Others beat their wings to push smoke away from the chicks. Athena watches, impressed. She learns fast. Fire breeds engineers. Yet amid the chaos, another figure rises, the swift-wing leader, Keros. His voice booms across the clearing. Forget committees. Follow me. The only law now is survival. Dozens of young owls follow instantly. They dive low, attacking the fire directly, trying to smother flames with frantic wing beats. It's brave and suicidal. The updraft hurls several skyward, coughing and half-burned. Cleo shouts for them to regroup, but Keros refuses. Democracy wastes time. We need one voice. And there it is, panic's favorite lie. The night becomes a theater of contradictions, coordination and chaos, courage and collapse. You see an old owl carrying a chick through the smoke, guided by shouted instructions from a council watcher. You see another crash from exhaustion. Then you hear it, a cracking sound like thunder. A burning trunk falls across the assembly stone, splitting the word assembly clean in half. Athena closes her eyes. Symbolism never misses its cues. By dawn, the fire subsides. The grove is blackened and silent. The air smells of ash and regret. Cleo gathers the survivors, her feathers streaked gray. We live, she says softly, and because we live together, we will rebuild together. But not all agree. Keros limps forward, coughing. You call that together? Half of us nearly died waiting for votes. Cleo meets his glare. And half would have died obeying a fool's charge. The crowd murmurs, divided again, but too weary to fight. Athena perches on a fallen branch. Now comes the second test, blame. In the weeks that follow, rebuilding begins. Nests are repaired, hatchlings cared for, trees replanted. But the unity of the crisis fades. Soon whispers return. Who started the fire? Who delayed the order? Who truly saved us? Committees form to investigate. The swift wings call them witch hunts. The council calls them accountability. Each side grows louder. Athena sighs. The moment danger passes, democracy forgets gratitude and remembers grudges. Cleo, exhausted, summons a general meeting. She stands before the half-burned assembly stone and speaks without notes. Every flame leaves a scar, But scars are not the end of flight. They are the price of learning. We must choose whether this fire burned our forest or forged our faith. Silence. Then, slowly, wings lift in agreement. But Keros isn't done. Beautiful words, he sneers, but words don't feed chicks. He tosses a charred worm husk at her feet. Your system promised fairness. All it gave us was ashes. She looks down at the husk, then let the assembly decide. The crowd stirs. A vote is called, unexpected, tense. Should Cleo remain first speaker or step aside for a new leader? Athena watches intently. Transitions, the crucible of democracy. Pebbles are cast, counted in silence. When the tally ends, it's almost even, but Cleo wins by 3 stones. She bows slightly to Keros. The assembly has spoken. You are still its citizen. He stares at her, feathers trembling. For now. Later that night, Athena finds you staring at the embers. You look troubled, she says. They survived, I replied, but at what cost? They're more divided than ever. That's how democracies survive, not by ending conflict, but by keeping it inside words instead of claws. She gestures toward the horizon, where faint light touches the trees. The moment they stop arguing, they will stop existing. Disagreement is their heartbeat. You watch Cleo standing alone by the broken stone, tracing the split word with her talon, half burned, half intact. Athena murmurs, she'll stay up all night thinking how to mend that crack. That's leadership. And softer, and loneliness. Weeks pass. Green returns to the grove. The owls rebuild, but differently. They design fire breaks, rain channels, alarm calls, all by collective vote. The assembly stone remains split, left that way deliberately. A reminder, she says, that perfection breaks. Even Keros attends meetings again, though he sits apart, muttering. Yet sometimes, when a debate grows heated, he surprises everyone by defending procedure. Athena notices. Rebels, once singed, become guardians. You smile. Maybe they've learned. She tilts her head. Learning is not the same as remembering. One evening, the council invites Athena to speak. She declines, but sends you instead. You stand on the stone, nervous, surrounded by a sea of glittering eyes. You tell them of human cities that rose and fell by the same trials. Athens, Rome, Florence. You speak of voices raised, laws broken and remade, of fires literal and moral. You tell them democracy is not a nest, it's a flight pattern, always shifting, never safe. When you finish, silence lingers. Then, quietly, Cleo lifts her wing. Let that be entered into record as the teaching of the 2 flames, for both fire and speech burn, yet also give light. Athena, watching from above, smiles. They quote you now. Congratulations, your myth material. You exhale. And what happens next? She gazes at the horizon. The same thing that happens to every democracy. They'll forget, then rediscover. They'll argue, then unite, then argue again. And one day they'll teach others to do the same. You glance skyward where smoke has given way to starlight. The air hums with distant hoots, not of panic, but of discussion. Endless, imperfect, alive. Athena folds her wings. Come, there's another dawn to watch. You walk beside her through the ashes and sprouts, and behind you the assembly begins once more, voices weaving the fragile, indestructible fabric of freedom. Section 8. The grove quiets with time. What was once fire-scarred now glows again under moonlight, stitched together by moss and memory. You'd almost think nothing happened. except for the blackened stump that still stands at the center, a silent warning against forgetting. Athena perches above it one evening, bronze feathers gleaming faintly. "They've started carving stories," she says, gesturing toward the hillside. You squint and see little scratches in the bark, rows of curved lines, circles, and tiny feather marks. Primitive, yes, but patterned. They're writing? In a manner of speaking, memory with symbols. Every democracy sooner or later invents a way to argue without shouting. You watch as Cleo and the others trace their minutes of assembly, each line a decision, a hope, a mistake. Somewhere between the grooves and curls, you spot an owl trying to draw Athena's helmet. It looks more like a loaf of bread. "Close enough," she says with a wry smile. One night, as cicadas drone low, Athena takes you up to the marble heights of the Parthenon itself. It's under construction. Scaffolding glimmers in torchlight, mortal stonemasons snoring in corners. "You wanted to see echoes?" she asks. She waves her hand. The city below flickers, time folding in layers. You see philosophers pacing, citizens arguing in the agora, young scribes drafting laws on wax tablets. "Listen carefully," she whispers. You listen, and there it is. The cadence of their voices matches the rhythm of the owl assemblies. Interruptions, laughter, complaint, applause. You could almost mistake one for the other. Athena smiles faintly. They think they invented discourse. Really, they just translated hoots into words. You laugh softly. Historians still argue whether your owls influenced the first Athenian councils. And they always will. Facts are fragile creatures, easier to worship than verify. She gestures toward a sculptor chiseling friezes along the temple's upper band. See the small forms hidden between the gods? Tiny owls, hardly noticeable unless you know to look. You step closer. Sure enough, feathered figures nestle near Athena's shield, eyes wide and eternal. "I let them keep the symbol," she says. "It's my reminder to the mortals. Wisdom has wings." Back in the grove, the owls evolve further. They've built a circular amphitheater from woven vines. Now, instead of chaotic crowds, they sit in nested rings, each level representing a region, each region sending one delegate to the central stone. Athena watches with amused pride. Representative democracy. Took humanity 4 centuries to invent that. These fluffballs did it in 2 seasons. You chuckle. Do they still argue about worms? Oh, constantly. But now they call them resources and issue little clay tokens to track them. Currency, then. I suppose civilization was inevitable. One evening, the debate turns philosophical. A young owl, silver feathers, curious eyes, stands and asks, "Why must Athena decide what is just? Can we not measure justice ourselves?" The question ripples like a cold breeze. You glance at Athena. She doesn't answer, just folds her arms and listens. "That," she murmurs, "is the most dangerous question in any democracy. Who decides fairness?" The assembly wrestles with it for hours. Some argue that Athena's wisdom is the foundation of order. Others say wisdom must grow from within the many, not descend from above. By dawn, they reach an astonishing compromise. Athena may guide, but not rule. They vote to give themselves the right to ignore her advice, respectfully, of course. You glance at the goddess. How does it feel to be outvoted by birds? She smirks. The same as being outvoted by philosophers, mildly insulting, mostly amusing. Weeks pass. The grove becomes more than a home. It's an academy. Owls from distant forests arrive to observe, to learn how self-rule feels. Debates stretch long into dawn. They discuss migration routes, egg-sharing policies, even poetry. You wander among them, listening. Their arguments sound eerily familiar. Freedom versus safety, tradition versus reform, majority versus minority. It's as if you're hearing the entire history of human politics in feathers and moonlight. Athena leans beside you. Democracy isn't natural, she says softly, but neither is silence. They've learned to sing their disagreements. You nod. And you? What have you learned? That patience, she says, is heavier than wisdom. One morning, a flock of human philosophers, real ones, not divine illusions, wander into the grove. They followed rumors of talking owls. You recognize one, a young student named Socrates. He stares wide-eyed as the birds engage in what looks disturbingly like parliamentary procedure. Athena chuckles invisibly. Mortals are so predictable. They'll take notes, then claim it was all their idea. Socrates turns to his companion. Observe, Glaucon, even beasts deliberate. Perhaps reason is a gift, not a monopoly. Athena watches fondly. He'll forget this detail when he writes, but he'll remember the rhythm. You smile. So your experiment leaks into legend. That's how history works. Ideas escape their cages. Later, as twilight deepens, the owls hold a great convocation to honor Athena. Clio stands before the crowd and speaks. You showed us wings can do more than fly. They can gesture, vote, protect. You gave us freedom, but the courage to keep it we found ourselves. Athena bows her head slightly. You always had it, she says softly. They offer her a gift, not gold, not gems, just a single perfect feather dipped in ash and honey. So you remember us, Clio says. Athena accepts it with rare tenderness. I will. That night, she places the feather at the foot of her statue in Athens. Centuries later, archaeologists will find a faint dark stain there and wonder if it was candle soot. Historians still argue.
Seasons pass, and the grove turns quiet again. The debates grow softer, the nights longer. You can feel it, something shifting, as if the air itself carries nostalgia. Even the moon seems slower to rise. Athena sits on her favorite branch, tracing idle circles in the bark. "They're forgetting why they began," she murmurs. "It always happens in peacetime." Down below, the owls no longer meet every night. Committees handle small disputes. Most gatherings now are festivals rather than assemblies. The air of ceremony has replaced the thrill of argument. You wander through the grove at dusk, noticing new carvings along the trees, records of votes long past, now moss-covered and half illegible. A young owl asks you, "What did this one mean?" You squint. The glyph once marked the fire decree, unity in the face of disaster. "It meant survival," you say. The owl tilts its head. "We have that already." And it flutters away, uninterested. Athena sighs. That's the curse of success. They've built comfort so they no longer guard its source. Still, Clio remains faithful. Older now, her feathers streaked with gray, she keeps the minutes even when no one listens. Each night, she sets a pebble in a bowl, one for every meeting kept, one for every silence endured. The bowl is nearly full. You find her one evening beneath the assembly stone, murmuring to herself. "You miss them," you say. She smiles faintly. "I miss the noise. Democracy is supposed to sound messy. Lately, it's too polite." Athena appears beside her, voice soft. "When owls grow quiet, I worry." Clio bows low. "We still honor your laws." "I never wanted laws. I wanted learning." Clio nods. "Then perhaps we've graduated." The goddess laughs gently. "Perhaps, but graduates rarely stay wise." Word spreads of distant flocks ignoring the assembly entirely. Some no longer send delegates. Others claim self-rule, declaring independence with self-satisfied hoots. A few even deny that Athena ever taught them anything at all. One delegation arrives from the northern cliffs, proud and bristling. Their spokesman declares, "We no longer need Athens' ways. Our wings are our law." Athena raises an eyebrow. "And when two wings disagree?" He hesitates. "Then we settle it by flight. Whoever flies highest decides." She sighs. "Ah, aristocracy of altitude. I should have predicted that." You whisper, "Historians still argue whether this moment marks the birth of pride or the death of unity." "Both," Athena says. Clio calls an emergency session, the first in months. She pleads for reunion, for shared law, for memory. "If we forget our counsel, we return to the forest before wisdom." Her words echo beautifully through the amphitheater, but fewer than half the nests send representatives. The rest stay home, feathers fluffed in comfortable apathy. Athena watches from the shadows. Every democracy faces two plagues, corruption and boredom. The second kills faster. The assembly votes to preserve the union. The motion passes narrowly. Clio looks relieved, but you can see in her eyes that she knows the truth. Survival by one vote is survival on borrowed time. That winter, storms batter the grove. Lightning strikes the oldest tree, the one that once sheltered the first debates. It splits clean down the middle, like the assembly stone years before. The fire this time is smaller, but crueler. It burns the library of bark carvings, centuries of recorded wisdom reduced to ash. You stand in the rain with Athena, watching the smoke curl upward. "They'll rebuild it," you say, half hopeful. "They'll tell themselves they will. But memories without rituals fade like this smoke. It will drift into myth before the next moon. She kneels, gathering a bit of ash in her hand. This, she says, is how gods become stories, and stories become dreams. Cleo gathers the survivors once more. We may lose our records, she tells them, but not our rhythm. She beats her wings 3 times, the old call to order, and for one night the grove fills again with voices. Athena smiles faintly. Even at twilight, democracy sings. The owls debate until dawn, whether to restore the old system, to migrate, or to entrust everything to memory. When the vote is called, it's unanimous on one point only, that they will remember. But memory is fickle. Within weeks, the council dissolves again. Flocks scatter. Some head towards the sea, others vanish into the mountains. The grove grows quiet once more. Athena perches on the empty assembly stone. And so it ends, she whispers, not with rebellion, but with forgetting. You sit beside her. Is that failure? She thinks a long time before answering. No, it's proof that they were free. Only the free can choose to forget. Years or centuries pass. You lose track. The grove becomes legend among humans. Shepherds tell tales of wise owls who once ruled like men. Philosophers carve tiny owl motifs into their scrolls for luck. Eventually, the birds themselves forget that they ever debated. Only the instinct remains, the habit of turning their heads, of seeing all sides. Athena visits less often now. Each time she returns, she seems a little fainter, as though time erodes even gods who care too much. One evening, she sits beside you on the ruined stone, watching the first human torchlights shimmer in the valley below. Look, she says, they're building a new assembly. They'll argue, they'll falter, they'll think it's all original. You smile sadly. You'll tell them the truth. She shakes her head. No, truth without discovery teaches nothing. Dawn creeps across the marble. The grove glows gold one last time. The few remaining owls scatter towards the horizon, carrying with them fragments of words, rhythms of debate, habits of questioning. Athena stands. The experiment never truly ends. It only migrates. You glance up. To where? She points east, wherever voices gather in the dark, trying to decide what's right. You look again at the broken stone. Moss has almost erased the carvings. Only one faint line remains visible, a circle within a circle, the symbol of the first assembly. Athena traces it gently. Even gods can't make wisdom last forever, but we can make it begin again. The wind rises, scattering ash into light.
The grove is gone. You stand where it once stretched, and the air itself feels lighter, emptied of its ancient debates. Grasses have claimed the roots. Cicadas hum in the hollow where the assembly stone used to rest. From the distant hills, you can hear the faint cries of ordinary owls, hunters, not philosophers. They do not speak of justice or worms or votes, but when they turn their heads, wide-eyed and solemn, something deep and ancestral flickers behind the gold of their gaze. Athena appears beside you, her sandals brushing dew from the grass. So, she says quietly, the experiment sleeps, not dies? Nothing wise truly dies, she murmurs. It waits for another dusk, another question. The goddess gazes toward Athens, The Parthenon gleams in the distance, wrapped in marble and memory. Within its shadows, people argue, loudly, passionately, imperfectly. You can almost hear them echo the same rhythms once carried by feathers. Athena listens with a faint smile. "There," she says, "they've already stolen the melody." You walk with her through the city. A street performer declaims before a crowd. Coins clink, voices overlap, opinions clash. Democracy, she muses, was never about agreement. It's the art of staying together while disagreeing. You nod. And the owls? They'll live on in symbols, a carving here, a proverb there. Children will learn that an owl stands for wisdom, but they'll never suspect it once held elections.
She looks up at the temple where her image stands, bronze, motionless, serene. "Statues are poor teachers," she says softly. "But maybe that's the point. Mortals must teach each other." You find yourself wondering if she regrets it all. The noise, the failures, the slow forgetting. Athena turns, reading your thought as easily as the wind. Regret? No. Regret belongs to endings. I prefer continuations. Then she gestures toward the horizon, where gulls circle in dawnlight. See them? Even seabirds quarrel about direction. Democracy has wings enough for oceans. The centuries slide past you like water. Human empires rise and fall. Laws change languages. The owl becomes a coin, then a metaphor, then a bedtime story. Historians still argue whether Athena ever walked the earth, or if the whole myth was the invention of poets who needed a divine mascot for reason. Somewhere in a quiet library, a scholar copies a line from an old tablet. The wise see in darkness. He pauses, smiles, and draws a tiny owl beside it, though he doesn't know why. The ink dries, and far away in another age, a single owl perches on a lamppost above a sleeping city. Neon flickers in its eyes. Beneath it, in a parliament hall, humans shot over one another, arguing budgets, laws, futures. The owl blinks once, slow and ancient, as if recognizing the tune. You can almost hear Athena's whisper through the hum of traffic. "See, they still vote." The voices fade now,